Welcome to Melt. I'm Suresh Venkat. On today's show, we are recapping the highlights from the recent SMARTIES Awards organized by the India chapter of MMA Global. For a bit of context, the MMA is a marketing trade association that brings together the full ecosystem of marketers, MarTech, and media companies to architect the future of marketing. The SMARTIES recognize creativity, innovation, and celebrate the future of marketing excellence. Let's first recap the winners of the industry awards. Hindustan Unilever Limited's Sunlight won the most resilient brand of the year. Amazon Ads was honored as the publisher of the year. Cadbury Celebrations emerged as the brand of the year. Rephrase.ai and Baffle won enabling technology companies of the year. Ogilvy India emerged as the creative agency of the year, while Wavemaker took home the honor of media agency of the year. Mondelez won the Marketer of the Year. Finally, the Best of Show honours at the 2022 SMARTIES India Awards was won by the Shah Rukh Khan starring My Ads campaign for Mondelez India's Cadbury Celebrations. Yes, after winning multiple elephants at the Curious Creative Awards and several other accolades around the world, the campaign clearly wowed the jury at the SMARTIES as well. Here's the campaign and why it won the hearts of the SMARTIES jury.
Presenting Not Just a Cadbury Ad. This Diwali, we helped hundreds of small businesses by making India's biggest brand ambassador be their brand ambassador.
इस दिवाली आप भी ना अपने पास वाले फैशन और एम्पोरियम से ही कपड़ों की शॉपिंग करना और फिर एम्पायर फुटवेयर नाम तो सुना होगा अपना स्टाइलिश चश्मा बगल वाले हेवन आई ऑप्टिशियन से ही लेना सिद्धि विनायक इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स से लेटेस्ट स्मार्टफोन खरीदकर धमाकेदार सेल्फी पोस्ट करना।
क्या कर रहे हो? मीठा लाए कि नहीं?
लाए हो ना यार अपने पास वाले रोशन किराना से आप भी अपना मीठा वहीं से लेना।
We used machine learning to recreate Shah Rukh Khan's face and voice to take the local store names in the ads.
इस दिवाली आप भी ना अपने पास वाले चॉइस ऑफ फैशन से ही कपड़ों की शॉपिंग करना। पास वाले आजकल फैशन से ही, रॉयल फैशन से ही, एमके क्लॉथ्स से ही, पास वाले लक्ष्मी कलेक्शन से ही कपड़ों की शॉपिंग करना। इस दिवाली आप भी ना
Different versions of the same ad with local store names were targeted as per the PIN code of the viewer, showing them only the nearby stores. But it is impossible to cover all the stores. So we gave the power to the people to create their own version of Not Just a Cadbury Ad. Any small business owner could promote their stores through their own social media networks like WhatsApp forwards and other social media pages.
शाहरुख खान मेरी दुकान गाइड करे।
हमारे आसपास की जो दुकानें हैं उनकी दिवाली भी तो मीठी होनी चाहिए।
Cadbury Celebrations, not just a Cadbury ad.
Of course, the technology of it is interesting, but the core consumer truth that is linked to that ad is a quote by Shah Rukh Khan himself, where he said that, you know, what all of India really wants is to take a selfie with Shah Rukh Khan. Right? So, and that ad does exactly that. It personalizes the whole experience where Shah Rukh Khan, India's biggest star at the moment, is actually naming a small business, a business owner, and almost becoming like their brand ambassador. It is like literally every common man's dream come true. So I think the ad manages to link that this consumer insight very well with a very simple but effective technology solution, and that's why it is making so much sense.
Normally you take a celebrity and it rests on just utilizing the celebrity. In this case, the context which is post-pandemic and utilizing that, energizing the channel, and third piece is making sure the brand's ethos is fulfilled. All three were giant tick marks.
It's a very simple communication, but I think the most important thing of the most beautiful communications are holding on to the simplicity, the core, and the love and the emotion of the brand, but yet, you know, making it relevant in today's context.
That work could have been, you know, very fake, very gimmicky on the face of it. The fact that it's real, it's worked, it has touched people's hearts, is what differentiates it. And I think it absolutely deserves all the awards that it's winning. There's a very thin line between gimmick and real. And I think this campaign has managed to do that.
While there's a fantastic creative idea, I think the way the brand has used technology to make it very relevant for the consumer target audience, let's say the retailers, I think that makes a huge difference, and that's a huge inspiration for other marketers to do it.
That campaign also won 5 gold medals at the Smarties. Overall, the jury culled out 88 winners from the 680 odd entries. Let's listen in to what the jury learned from the experience.
What it taught me is a lot of innovation. I mean, currently the entire marketing landscape, the technology landscape is changing rapidly. Earlier it used to change over a long period of time. Now it is changing almost on a monthly basis. For a brand like Bajaj Auto, I mean, we have a fairly high legacy and brand strength. At the same time, we are reaching out to new customers, completely new audiences. So therefore, it is always important for us to innovate and look at the consumer and the marketing landscape afresh. So what these Smarties did for me is to reevaluate some of the stuff that we are doing.
Metaverse and NFTs, we saw a very good set of entries, very inspirational set of entries. It's a new emerging space. Marketeers are grappling with it. But it's a space to do some innovations and make a difference.
And as a marketer, I think that it also brings out the fact that how today consumers have evolved and how brands are trying to resonate with the consumers of today, rather than, it's not creating an inspiration or an aspiration around a brand, but it's also how brands are trying to make it very real and a purposeful reason for them to exist.
Normally, you see digital with bottom of the funnel kind of work, and this time we had a lot of work which was brand building and top of the funnel, which genuinely enhanced the brand's stature and equity.
So a lot of work that we do today is based on our gut instinct, which is a combination of the knowledge that we've learned over the years and how we know our category behaves and our customers behave. Now added to that, what I've learned from here and what I'm telling my team is look at data, because data opens up a completely new world. So, our gut instinct plus data gives real world insights, which really helps. And that is what I'm asking my team to do now.
This year, the Smarties also introduced an award to recognize diversity and inclusion. Top honors of the Gold Award was won by Google India and Lolintas for the hashtag Search for Change or Bolne Se Sab Hoga campaign. Let's have a look.
With many organizations, laws and guidelines being set up to protect our rights, we women in India are as empowered as any in the world. But all of that is only on paper.
जो उनके अधिकार हैं, उसके बारे में भी उन्हें नहीं पता है.
Why don't we just Google our rights, right? Well, it's complicated.
Google सर्च की ताकत उन लोगों के लिए है जो अंग्रेजी लिख पढ़ सकते हैं, यानी 10% जनसंख्या. इसमें आप शिक्षा का जेंडर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन भी जोड़ लीजिए.
Google has all this empowering information that's hard to access for Hindi-speaking women in India. This goes against the very vision of Google. Voice is a natural fit for the Hindi-speaking user because it helps them bypass the barrier of typing and formulating queries. So we had to do something about it. Presenting Bolne Se Sab Hoga, Google's all-in effort to elevate the voice search experience.
We used our advanced machine learning models to reduce the word error rate. Simply put, it allowed us to understand the various Hindi dialects better than ever before. We also translated web content available only in English to Hindi, thereby also improving the content availability for local language users. Now, the tech was there. It was time to take it to Indian women. We promoted the improved technology with an integrated marketing campaign. The campaign kicked off with provocative outdoors featuring women trailblazers. This was complemented with inspiring stories of women social media influencers. And then came our films on International Women's Day.
महिलाओं के लिए बिजनेस लोन का विकल्प,
महिलाओं के लिए मुद्रा लोन स्कीम योजना खास है।
Result of all this? 300% rise in searches for help on sexual harassment, 12% increase in voice queries by female users. बोलने से सब होगा became an anthemic cry, and today more Indian women are speaking up on Google search than ever before. Truly, speaking makes everything possible.
The introduction of an award to celebrate diversity and inclusion paved the way for the India chapter of MMA Global to add to the conversation around DE&I. We at MELT fully support creating and fostering an inclusive culture in the workplace and hence urge brands to do more and go beyond mere lip service. To understand the crux of the conversation, we spoke to Valerie Beauchamp, VP and Global Head of Agency Development and Education at LinkedIn, Suklin Aneja, CEO of the Beauty and FMCG Brands business at the Good Glam Group, and Divyanshu Ganatra, the founder of ABBF or Adventures Beyond Barriers Foundation. Listen in. Valerie, Suklin and Divyanshu, welcome to MELT. Valerie, why is there a need to recognize and award DE&I at industry awards such as the SMARTIES?
One of the things that is pretty amazing about the impact of marketing and advertising is that it helps people sort of see the world as it should be rather than how it is. And so the chance for people to tell interesting, new and different stories with representative characters has a massive impact on how society believes the world can be.
Suklin, what were your takeaways from the shortlisted entries for the DE&I award at the SMARTIES?
I was really heartened to see that we're taking the discourse beyond gender. So there is clearly advertising that's also talking about various ethnicities, differently abled, and taking this entire conversation and narrative that is required to be done on diversity and inclusion starts with the way we depict our protagonists. And I think in mainstream advertising, the moment you start seeing communities that you don't see very often, it also shows that your products today are not designed only for the mainstream. And I think if large advertisers are able to step forward, I think it's heartening to see that it's a step in the right direction.
Could I add something to that? One of the things I think is amazing, back to the point of why bother to award it, is that in awarding it, you ultimately inspire a whole collective and a whole industry to move forward in that space. And so when you think a little bit about not only appealing to consumers beyond the mainstream, awarding it also inspires marketers to see the value for their business and expanding who their audiences are.
Divyanshu, all those entries are the cream of the crop, right? The very best of the DE&I conversation that corporate India has been having for a really long time. Where do you think corporate India's stance on DE&I is at this very moment?
It's really heartwarming finally to see conversations happening, the needle moving in corporate India, often sometimes because of mandates from MNCs abroad. But it's heartening that change is beginning to happen. While I say this, I also know we have a very, very long way to go. Just to give you a perspective, there's only 0.5% penetration of persons with disability in the corporate world in India. That's it, 0.5%. And we have 200 million people in this country. There's a long, long way to go. And we need our own models here. We cannot use templates straight up from the West. We need our own models. We need to experiment. We need to create our own systems that will work in this context. So yeah, but it's heartwarming.
I may add, if you actually go back in time, I think the entire DE&I conversation in every country across the world actually started with gender. And then the entire discourse now needs to progress beyond gender to actually be able to bring into the fold, like Divyanshu mentioned, differently abled, ethnic diversity, religious diversity. I mean, even if you look around in the boardrooms today, a country which has 1/6 of its population as Muslims, we don't have enough religious diversity. Ethnic diversity, or for that matter, even when you look at broadening the scope for differently abled, it is important to also invest in infrastructure that makes them succeed. So I think in that mandate, we are still very far behind. And I think unless organizations make it a point to measure and to take affirmative action towards change, it actually doesn't move.
So Valerie, what can marketers really actually do to move towards this vision of sorts? Is there a mantra that LinkedIn follows?
I'm going to take that back and kind of get to a very tactical application. I think one of the things that we have been struggling with inside the marketing and advertising industry generally is there's a clear understanding of the business case and the benefits of a diverse and inclusive workforce and leadership team. And there's a real commitment to want to doing it. But figuring out exactly what that means and how you translate that to application is somewhat challenging. There's bodies of research that are beginning to surface now about the business impact of representation in your creative storytelling that I think are really starting to help us develop practical application, right? Not just in how you cast a television ad, for example, but also what stories do you choose to tell in the way that you build them. And I think the more that we can identify really practical application for what I think is a very authentic commitment to this space, the more you'll be able to help marketers make meaningful advancements in the space.
Suklin, how challenging is it to develop and uphold a truly inclusive mindset across various brands that already have pre-existing cultures of sorts?
No, I think it's a very good question, but it all starts from the product philosophy, right? Are you fundamentally creating a product line that allows for ethnic diversities, that allows for everyone to be able to find meaning in that product, relevance in that product, and embrace it, right? So a lot of times the conversation actually begins there. So today, within the beauty industry, for instance, even when you look at a category like makeup, the very fact that if you remember a decade ago, you would go to a counter, you'd find 3 shades. Today, every single brand has taken it upon themselves to bring in 18, 50, 100 shades of skin color. So first thing to do is to embrace and recognize that we're all different and our differences need to be celebrated. I think the second important one is to also realize that as we celebrate our differences, we should never do it in a way that can make anybody else feel marginalized. And a very good example is the kind of response you saw to people abandoning the word fairness or fair. And today that has forced mainstream organizations also to replace a fair or a light to a benefit and not link it to a attribute which is beyond your control. Skin color is what you're born with, but what you celebrate is what happens to your skin, right? And in that regard, I think if you see within the beauty industry as well, there is a lot of change that has started. And a large part of that is consumers themselves absolutely rejecting any such ideas which discriminate on ideas which are beyond their control, right? So for sure, if you see around yourself, new age brands have definitely embraced it far better, right? And I would love to see more and more brands making it part of their product philosophy, not just in what they communicate in advertising, which sometimes can also be lip service.
So Divyanshi, let's get real. Unfortunately, as you know, for many corporates, DE&I at the workplace is relegated to checking tick boxes, almost paying lip service. What will it take to break this kind of mentality?
You have to break it, separate it from the charity model. You have to make a business case. And it has to be a rights-based model, it has to be a business case. And when you help corporates or businesses understand the ROI they're going to get, you're going to get 28% more ROI when you just include one minority group, which is persons with disability. That's when they start listening. and it no longer remains a business case. So if I tell you that if you make this little change, you can get about 345 million new customers. All you need to do is this little change. Aren't you sitting up and listening? If you make this change, you have 1.3 billion customers around the world that are completely new and untapped. And if you aren't listening, check your pulse. and I really believe that there's a huge business case. That I never made a case for charity. There's a huge business case. This is a talent pool. This is a consumer pool, a huge consumer pool that has been completely neglected. And that's where the markets are right now. And they have the potential, they have the power to, the income and the power to actually be your customers. But nobody's ever thought of them as customers.
I'm very glad you say this, because even when you look at the entire gender debate when it started, it began with initially a lot of lip service, right? Until a lot of noise started getting created. And then, of course, you had many empirical studies that were shared worldwide, which showed organizations which had senior leadership and at least at a gender level, enough representation of both men and women, they outperformed the others by a significant mile. I completely agree with you. The moment you actually put empirical data around, you look at the underserved audiences, or for that matter, what representation and diversity brings to your organization in the kind of businesses that you build, I think it makes a lot of difference and brings in a lot of force behind the activity without it just being a agenda item that you're serving.
Valerie, being a tech company, does LinkedIn have a code or an algorithm that helps the platform achieve its vision of improving D&I within the platform itself?
Sure. We're fortunate that our core vision as a company, actually inherent in that, is a commitment to diversity, to equity, and inclusion. I mean, our vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And within our marketing solutions business, we talk about unlocking economic opportunity for every organization worldwide. The use of the word every is very intentional. And what that means, though, is every time we begin to think about a product, a feature, a solution, an offering that we might bring to our members or bring to our customers, we're ruthlessly committed to the idea of an equitable outcome. And a great example of that is there's a massive opportunity to think about moving the global economy towards skills-based hiring. So removing some of those things that that segment people or reduce people's access to opportunity, where you live, where you went to school, who you know, where you've worked before that. But once you move to skills-based hiring, you have to ensure that every participant in that ecosystem is equally comfortable declaring and badging their skills. And we've seen in a lot of countries that women, or in the case of the US, people of color, do not declare their skills as overtly. And so if we went and built products and solutions and services around skills-based hiring without acknowledging that the system underneath it is broken, we are getting to an inequitable outcome, and that's just not acceptable. And so that is really the lens through which we look at everything that we do across the totality of the LinkedIn business. And we're fortunate that we're guided by our vision.
So Sucleen, is improving D&I a mandate for HR? Is it a mandate for the CMO? Or does it simply not matter whose mandate it is?
I completely believe it's an organization's mandate, because it's not just in the hiring, it's in the depiction of your products that you create, the advertising that you create, or in the way you even run the business, right? Unless the entire organization embraces it as an important mandate, it never percolates to real change. So different departments, of course, will have varying degrees of responsibility. Like for HR, it will be absolutely a mandate not just to hire, but also to ensure that the inclusion agenda is really delivered well. How you make people feel, because eventually people thrive when they feel good. So it's important that once you bring the talent in, how do you help them retain? How do you help them grow fast enough that you're creating a lot of heroes within the organization? Because it's about making a sustainable change. That can only happen when retention strategies are sharp, you see growth for the talent, the talent feels valued, and then you at least inspire many others to follow suit. So clearly that agenda is very sharply defined for HR. Perhaps for a marketer, in the products and the depiction of characters that they do, they have a responsibility to not further propagate stereotypes. But I would say even for the larger organization, as business leaders, every functional leader has that responsibility on his shoulder when he looks at his own team. Is my team really inclusive? Am I making it easier for others to thrive? And that's where I think change starts, because retention is for every function. And that responsibility is for every manager and leader within the organization. So that sensitivity that you have to build is a muscle that has to be built through the DNA of the organization.
All right, let's give the last word to Divyanshu. Divyanshu, anything you'd like to add?
I'm really happy to hear this conversation. I'm really happy people in the industry who are shaping our futures are thinking in this line, or are we really moving that direction? There's hope. I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of change. That's really heartwarming.
All right, Valerie, Sucleen, and Divyanshu, thank you for your time.
The pleasure's all ours. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this episode. You can follow Melt on social media. The handle is Ready to Melt, or simply log on to readytomelt.com. If you'd like to follow me, I'm @Suvenk on Twitter. Till next week, goodbye and thanks for watching.